Hello, you're tuned in to Cubitt Community Radio for a special episode of Slippy Discussions with me, Unknown Niece. This episode is the third and final instalment of a three-part series of interviews on Slippy Vision, exploring the importance of physical music spaces as sites of community building, political activism, and creative experimentation. Thanks to everyone who listened to October's episode, where I interviewed my good friend, radio broadcaster and journalist Rachel Ashby about the importance of physical radio spaces, with a particular focus on Tāmaki Auckland's 95BFM station. You can find both that episode and my first episode with Anjali Prashar Savoy on the Cubitt Community Radio Mixcloud and YouTube channels, and also on my SoundCloud page. This episode, I feel very honoured to be joined by NABEEL ZUBERI, who is an Associate Professor in Media and Communication at the University of Auckland, Aotearoa, New Zealand. NABEEL was the supervisor for my final university dissertation, and I also worked as a research assistant on one of the books NABEEL was in the process of writing. It's fair to say NABEEL's academic and musical mentorship was central in shaping my relationship to musicological research and socio-cultural analysis during that time. NABEEL has published notable long-form academic works such as 2001's Sounds English, Transnational Popular Music. He co-edited 2014's Black Popular Music in Britain since 1945, and is co-editing forthcoming book Synth Pop and Its Repercussions, to be published by Bloomsbury. His research explores 20th and 21st century popular music genres in the UK and US, in relation to race, ethnicity, transnationalism, South Asian and African diasporas. And so for this final interview of Slippy Discs, I've asked NABEEL to choose 4 to 5 tracks which hold personal significance to him and shed light on particular music scenes, communities or experiences he's engaged with throughout his life. So NABEEL, thank you so much for coming on the show. And before we get onto your first track selection, would you like to introduce yourself in your own words, as I'm aware that was a very academic-centric description of who you are and what you do?
Well, thanks for having me, Charlie. I really appreciate it. It's nice to be alongside those other 2 talks that you had, conversations about music and spaces and activism. I teach at University of Auckland, Waipapa Taumatara, and I've been here in Aotearoa, New Zealand for almost 30 years now, and I've been trained in film, television and media studies, teach courses on popular music on screen. I teach about the music industry and formats, and some sound studies as well at the undergraduate and postgraduate level. I also have for a long time been involved in, like yourself really, in community radio. I started off in college radio in the US when I studied there as a postgraduate student, and was on Base FM weekly with my friend Nick for a weekly show for about 18 years, till about 3 years ago, and had a little bit of a hiatus, and now I'm we're back again on the radio, actually, on TBC, so it's nice to return to kind of spiritual home, I guess, radio for me.
So we'll get into the first track that you've chosen. So NABEEL, you've chosen Safety Pin Stuck in My Heart by Patrick Fitzgerald from his EP of the same name, released on Small Wonder Records in 1978. Do you remember where you were or what you were doing the first time you heard this record, and what drew you towards it?
Yeah, well, I took your prompt that, it's what kind of musical communities have been really important. So songs that kind of open up a discussion about those communities. So I remember that I heard this song in my friend Mike's bedroom. He would, we'd spend afternoons after school back in probably 1978, I would think, maybe, or 79. I can't remember exactly I've forgotten what year.
I think it came out in 1978.
Yeah, so 78, 79, he had this record. And it was really Mike, and I must have been about 15, 16. Mike really introduced me to punk rock. And it's really Mike and a few other school friends that were kind of that initial music community that was, really important in kind of shaping taste and what you read, where you go out to, what kind of music you're into, talking about music, going to gigs together. So Safety Pin stuck in my heart, is like, it's a kind of a sort of a homage to punk rock. Patrick Fitzgerald is always talking about, in the song, he kind of talks about, well, it's the beat, which sings about the beat being the most important thing. So I thought that's kind of the most fundamental thing, really, still for me with most of the kind of music that I listen to. Punk rock was really the kind of cultural phenomenon that really made sense of the world for me then. I was kind of quite angry, working out things, as you do as a teenager, trying to figure out who I was. And punk really kind of made sense of that for me and kind of made me think about music as something that had a wider social resonance and gave you lots of answers to things.
Yeah, I was going to ask, were you living in West Yorkshire at the time, is that correct?
Yeah, I was living in a small town called Ilkley of about 20,000 people at that time, which is around 12 or 13 miles just west of Leeds and Bradford. Practically, I think there were like 2 Asian families in that town, and we'd often get confused for each other. I think there's me, and I have 3 siblings, 2 brothers and a sister, and this other family, the Doshis, were a Gujarati family. Same kind of distribution of brothers and sisters, and I know that the white folks in town would often confuse us and start talking to me thinking I was one of this other family and vice versa. I went to a comprehensive school there in Ilkley, and a bunch of friends there. We got into the music, the Clash, the Sex Pistols, started reading Sounds, and then a little bit later the NME, and then going to lots of gigs in Leeds and Bradford, more Leeds and Bradford as I recall. But that was my first real kind of musical community, I guess, a handful, just boys initially, until a few years later when I'd start going clubbing. But punk was what really I thought, all I want to do to be involved. I knew I wasn't a musical person in terms of having any musical ability or even wanting to play an instrument particularly, but I knew that I wanted to write about music, and I loved radio, like many people of my generation or even younger folks. We were like listening to John Peel every night on BBC Radio 1 till midnight.
I understand that to be a central part of, that sort of DIY politics and aesthetic of punk. Did that have an effect on you growing up, this idea in which, maybe you can't play a musical instrument, but kind of being engaged in a culture that sort of encouraged picking up whatever tools you had and creating, do you think that had an effect on you sort of throughout your life, kind of engaging with that sort of politics of punk from a young age?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I really wanted to write, and so somebody in town had started a fanzine. I don't know how many issues it lasted, probably not that many, like many of those kind of typewritten fanzines that were kind of hastily assembled, right, in kind of limited numbers. But I remember there was a fanzine called Noise from the Valleys, because we're in one of the valleys in Yorkshire, in the West Riding, and I remember writing reviews in there. I wrote a piece about one of my favourite songs, Question Mark and the Mysterians, 96 Tears. So yeah, I think we were all like, oh, you can do it now, you can do something yourself. So it was punk was a real portal into kind of learning about lots of other things. Through record sleeves you found out about art, the history of art, through the songs themselves or what people said in the interviews. You heard about writers and became curious about them, checked those out as well. So it was a kind of, I guess it was the pre-internet network culture of that time for many of us.
Yeah, let's listen to Patrick Fitzgerald, Safety Pin Stuck in My Heart.
I don't love you for your graveyard eyes, I don't love you for your shaven thighs, I just love you for that beat, 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 beating. I don't love you for your tattooed tie, I don't love you and I don't know why, I just love you for that beat, 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 beating. I've got a safety pin stuck in my heart, for you, for you. I've got a safety pin stuck in my heart, for you, for you. Don't love you for your professed hate, I don't love you for your cards of fate, I just love you for that beat, 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 beating. I don't love you for your painted shoes, I don't love you for your friends you never choose, I just love you for that beat, 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 beating. I've got a safety pin stuck in my heart, for you, for you. I've got a safety pin stuck in my heart, for you, for you. I've got a safety pin stuck in my heart, for you, for you. I've got a safety pin stuck in my heart, for you, for you. I don't love you for your many reasons, propaganda, doctrines, treasons. All I know's that beat, 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 beating. I've got an ear inflamed on my dog chain, painted faces, painted names, my shirt, it's all that beat, 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 beating. I've got a safety pin stuck in my heart, for you, for you. I've got a safety pin stuck in my heart, for you, for you. I've got a safety pin stuck in my heart, for you, for you. I got a safety pin stuck in my heart, for you, 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 for you. I got a safety pin stuck in my heart, for you, for you, for you, for you, for you. I got a safety pin stuck in my heart, for you.
Nabeel, your second pick is the track I Know You Got Soul by Eric B. and Rakim from their groundbreaking 1987 debut album Paid in Full, which was released on 4th and Broadway Records. Why did you choose this record?
Well, this record, I think, when it was released, I was studying for I remember when I bought it, I was studying for my final exams at Nottingham University. I was doing American studies, and I would play this to just rev myself up. I played the Four Tops, I Can't Help Myself, and this tune to kind of rev myself up in the morning for the week of every day for the week of exams. So I'd been into hip hop for a few years at that point, but there's a very famous lyric there. I mean, that song has been sampled by many people, but it's got a famous lyric by Rakim that goes, "It ain't where you're from, it's where you're at." And that was later kind of, or around the same time or a few years later, picked up by Paul Gilroy, Black British writer in cultural studies, who I was reading. And it became a really kind of a fulcrum, really, of me thinking about diaspora, that there are roots, but also roots, ROUTES, as well, in terms of culture, my own experience, music more broadly. And I always had a fascination as a student, of the US, with Black America, right? With African American history, African American literature, and film and music in particular. So to me, this is kind of part of that continuum. Rakim's an amazing, I mean, he's my favorite. If I had to choose 5 of my favorite MCs, as many hip hop fans do, I don't know what the other 4 would be. It's always a kind of moving group, but Rakim is really up there as number 1, just in terms of his flow and his kind of incredibly astute and clever writing.
I mean, the technicalities in this album, am I correct in saying, he was creating new rhyme patterns that hadn't really been heard throughout hip-hop before that?
Yeah, I think from what I've read and interviews that I've watched with Rakim, he played saxophone. That's how he first came to music. I
didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so then he tried to kind of use the way that he'd, played the saxophone to kind of inform his flow. And then he was just using words and in quite a philosophical way. He was a member of I think he still might be actually, of the 5% Nation of Islam. So he had that kind of cosmology there in the lyrics, in the rhymes. And he was quite one of the early ones to do that, I think. Many others have followed after that. But as I recall, it was like really listening to someone who had amazing flow, and the sound of the voice was amazing, but also he was saying something, deeper than a lot of other hip hop at the time. I mean, there had been socially conscious rhymes, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five with The Message and so on, but I think Rakim was kind of a deeper level that, and later it was he did actually write more directly sort of political rhymes about the Iraq War and police and so on as well.
And in terms of, his musical partner, Eric B, I mean, I wondered if you'd like to sort of speak about some of the technical prowess Eric B kind of presents throughout the record, particularly, the sampling and the scratching techniques. I think about how almost the excitement of hip-hop was that it was sort of repurposing and remixing, aspects of different 20th century Black American music, such as jazz, soul and funk, taking the breakdown and and creating loops out of them, via turntable work, or also sampling vocals throughout from those kinds of musics, from hip hop tracks. Was that as an album, Paid in Full, was that reasonably quite forward thinking what Eric B was doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that album collected some of the singles that they'd released there. So I think one of the tracks on some of the, I mean, they'd had some new songs as well, but I think like Eric B for President, Eric B is on the cut, which really showed off scratching. So I'd heard scratching for a while, but yeah, that was just exciting new sounds. Hip hop's so amazing because it was a composite of what sounded like a completely new sonic world. Though it was using old recordings, just the scratching was a relatively new art by that point. Sampling, the other reason I kind of chose this tune was also because it's a Bobby Bird track, I Know You Got Soul, that was produced by James Brown. Okay, and this is a moment in hip hop where it's kind of the height of where James Brown is being sampled in so many different ways. James, from Funky Drummer to his Scream, in so many different iterations across hip hop, and that was also kind of part of another scene that I was kind of interested in. I don't recall, because I wasn't living in London at the time. There was a warehouse scene, which had kind of smaller warehouse parties where so-called rare groove was being played. So mostly this was 60s and early 70s funk. And so James Brown was really central to that. And James Brown was kind of a little bit, over the hill, but still touring. And in fact, his career kind of revived because this sound was really popular. Partly because so many hip hop artists are sampling Brown, but also in Britain, it's very much part of that rare groove scene of people dancing to funk records.
That's a very interesting connection to make, as someone growing up in the UK. Meanwhile, hip hop is repurposing this, another side of James Brown records.
Just talk about that. It's been a long time, I shouldn't have left you without a strong rhyme to step to. Think of how many week shows you slept through. Time's up, I'm sorry I kept you thinking of this. You keep repeating your miss the rhymes from the microphone solo with. So you sit by the radio, hand on the dial soon. As you hear it, pump up the volume. Dance with the speaker till you hear it blow. Then plug in a headphone, cause here it go. It's a four-letter word when it's heard to control your body to dance. So dot text a tempo like a red alert. Reaches your reflex and let it work. When this is playing, you can't get stuck with the steps. So say, and I'ma still come up with a gift to be swift. Follow the leader, the rhyme will go deaf with the record that was mixed a long time ago. It could be done, but only I could do it. For those that can dance and clap your hands to it. I start to think, and then I sink into the paper like I was ink. When I'm writing, I'm trapped in between the line. I escape when I finish the rhyme. I got soul. Your mic, the stage is empty. A beat like this might tempt me to pose, show my rings and my fat gold chain. Grab the mic like I'm on Soul Train, but I wait, cause I master this. Let the others go first so the brothers don't miss. Eric B, break the sticks. You got it. Rock him will begin when you make the mix. I'll experiment like a scientist. You wanna rhyme? You gotta sign my list. Cause I'm a manifest and bless the mic I'll hold. You want an X? Then you gotta have soul. Cause if you ain't got it, I'ma make an encore. Take the mic, make the people respond for the R. Cause that's the way it'll have to be.
If you wanna get on after me, think about it. Wait, erase your rhyme, forget it. And don't waste your time, cause I'll be in the crowd if you ain't controlling it. Drop the mic, you shouldn't be holding it. This is how it should be done. This style is identical to none. Some try to make it sound like this, but you're getting me. So upset that I'm wet cause you're sweating me. I drip steam like a microphone theme. Ego to MC is my theme. I get hype when I hear drum roll. Rakim is on the mic, and you know I got soul. You got it. You got it. Who can't say my name? First of all, I'm the soloist, the soul controller. Rakim gets stronger as I get older. Constant elevation, cause expansion. I write my rhymes while I cool in my mansion. They put it on tape and in the city I test it. Then on the radio, the R's requested. You listen to it, the concept might break you. Cause almost anyone can relate to whoever's out of hand. I'ma give them handles. Light them up, blow them out like candles. Or should I just let them melt? To give them a hand so they can see how I felt. I'm not bold just cause I rock gold. Rakim is on the mic, and you know I got soul. Soul. You got it. You got it. You got it. You got it. Now I'ma stop to see what you got. Get off the mic before it get too hot. I wanna see which posse can dance the best. It should be easy cause the beat is fresh. Now feel from uptown, Brooklyn bound, the Bronx, Queens, or Long Island Sound. Even other states come right and exact. It ain't where you're from, it's where you're at. Since you came here, you have to show and prove. And do that dance until it don't move. That's all you need is soul, self-esteem, and release. The rest is up to you. Rakim or say peace.
So, Nabeel, your third track is High-Tech Jazz, The Science by Galaxy to Galaxy, which was a group made up of various members from the musical collective and label Underground Resistance, or UR. And this was a compilation record released, this was part of a compilation record released on Submerge Recordings in 2005. Now, in thinking through the genesis of Detroit techno, I understand it as a movement that began somewhat through a seizing of the means of sonic production. This was music created by young black men buying drum machines and synthesizers from pawn shops and repurposing these machines, pushing this hardware to its limit to create a sound completely alien to what anyone had heard before. And these artists' processes of technological invention were strongly shaped through theoretical frameworks of Afrofuturism and Black futurity. Can you speak about the significance of Underground Resistance as a musical collective and label in developing the character and legacy of Detroit techno from the late 1980s onwards, and sort of your connection to this music? And also, I'm aware, as you've already mentioned, the fact that you were living in the Detroit area. What was it like to be in this space at this time?
It was really odd because no one I knew. I went to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the Detroit area in 1988, in August 1988, and it's really, techno is really taking off in terms of how it's covered in the British press, but there's hardly anything in the US press at all, or they weren't really that interested in dance music or even electronic music for that matter. I mean, in terms of the mainstream media or the music press as well. So Underground Resistance are one of many people there. So I started hearing this music, but I was reading about it from the English music press, you know, so I would still buy magazines from England.
Okay.
And the NME was covering that as well at that time. So they were writing about it as this exotic thing happening in Detroit. And no one I knew in Ann Arbor was really into this music.
That's really interesting.
But occasionally when we went to concerts in Detroit, there were also clubs. Like there was a famous club called The Shelter, which would have quite a few techno nights. I never went to the Music Institute, I think it was, where many of these artists played in the late 80s. But I'd already been primed for kind of electronic music through childhood and going clubbing in Yorkshire and Leeds as well for a few years when I was there, and then in Nottingham as well. But I chose this one because Underground Resistance are really they kind of had a strong connection to black nationalism. You know, they're still kind of coming out of that experience of the post-civil rights era, and what post-industrial Detroit, what's happening, the kind of gutting of the inner city, I guess, that's going on, and that helped to create this music, which seemed to kind of so appropriately capture the feeling of that place, of the landscape of the inner city, as there's all this white flight from there. But Underground Resistance, they've always they pressed their own records, I think, released their own records. They've been fiercely independent, and kind of had a few core members, but a kind of a moving group of artists. And like many other Detroit artists, they created a kind of world. I often think it's funny, in the last few years, people talk about world making in the media or in video games or whatever element of culture. But I thought that was something that they were doing through these 12-inch singles and EPs, and just through the sound and the titles of songs. I mean, you've read Kojo Eshin, who writes a lot about them. Yeah. And I just thought, they're kind of quite militant as well. So they created this world that was also allegorical in terms of thinking about the environment as well, about climate, as well as kind of the sort of Star Wars kind of imaginary that a lot of artists have kind of adapted in a way. People who grew up with Star Wars and that kind of science fiction. So I had it's not necessarily Underground Resistance, but I think Detroit techno was where I really started to think about electronic music and science fiction and black science fiction. It wasn't called Afrofuturism back then. That becomes a term that's sort of used a bit later in the early 90s, really, early to mid 90s. But that makes sense of all of this kind of speculative music and speculative writing and thought. It also, rather like Eric B. and Rakim as well, spoke to a kind of radical Black American tradition that's always motivated me. I think, growing up in England at a particularly kind of racist time, the National Front, and kind of populist racism sounds familiar, right?
Totally.
I'm sort of seeing what's happening now reminds me a lot of the 1970s. We looked, a lot of young Asians looked to Black America as a kind of, for models of revolutionary praxis or struggle, or a kind of cultural politics that we could cling on to. And it came with great imagery and music as well. So I also wanted to I chose this tune as well because it's making that direct connection to jazz, and I really don't like those sort of Wynton Marsalis type of this is jazz and it stops, in 1960 something, and what happens after that isn't jazz. So I think of techno and hip hop and many forms of black music with a capital B as being connected to jazz. They're still part of that tradition. You can hear that there, in the work of lots of those Detroit musicians and Chicago house musicians as well. But the jazz tradition is there in a lot of these musical forms, alongside blues and so on, rather than kind of trying to demarcate them as having started and ended and then led to something else. I think they're kind of more closely related. So that's another reason I chose that tune.
Thanks so much, Nabeel. I feel like I could talk for all these tracks for so much longer. But we'll have a listen to Galaxy to Galaxy with the track High Tech Jazz, The Science now. The fourth track you've chosen is called Shoes Off by Sweatshop Boys from their 2016 album Kashmir, released on Customs. Nabeel, you introduced me to Sweatshop Boys in 2019 when I was researching for your book about popular music, media and race after 9/11. Can you tell us more about the themes and ideas you explore in that research, and why in particular Sweatshop Boys are one of the artists that you chose to write about?
Right, so I think after 9/11, and I can remember that really, really vividly, after 9/11, I just knew that I could only make sense of this through kind of playing music, or playing records and listening to music. I just knew I had to work on that, even if it would take me forever. I'm still working on it. I've written parts of it. And the reason that I came to this was that I like many people that grew up, in a Muslim household, raised as Muslims, whether we were religious or not, or secular, or had left Islam, we knew that we're Muslims in a new way now after 9/11. So I was trying to make, initially, when I started working on this book, I was thinking about trying to make sense of that, and where was music and how was music responding to this moment and what was happening around us. And so one of the that was happening in hip hop a lot. So I was interested in artists like MIA as well, and also kind of references to the war on terror in grime as well. Various MCs in London talking about Bin Laden, or mentioning Afghanistan, or Iraq, or whatever, So Sweatshop Boys, because one of the people that wrote about the war on terror was Riz Ahmed. He's an actor as well.
Yeah.
And more well known now, but I've kind of been following his work. And I thought the Sweatshop Boys are interesting because they're also this transatlantic group or duo. So it's Heems, who's from Queens in New York City, who's an Indian American from a Hindu background, and Riz Ahmed from a Muslim Pakistani background in the UK. And they start collaborating together. They've done some interesting work as solo artists, and Heems with Das Racist, a really interesting group in the States. And so they only made about 3 records, I think, Sweatshop Boys, though they have played at Coachella and so on. But they wrote a lot of songs about being stopped and frisked and checked at airports, traveling. Riz wrote about only getting kind of roles as terrorists in his early career. And this song, though, I just think is really interesting because it's like using that metaphor or that idea of taking your shoes off. It can refer to, you take your shoes off when you go to the masjid, the mosque, to pray, or when you go into a South Asian house, or when you're getting on the plane as well, through the security and so on. So they use that idea to kind of explore kind of many elements. And Riz in that tune is talking about some of the younger Muslims who left to join, Islamist groups overseas, in Afghanistan or wherever. Yeah. So I thought, well, here's someone who's actually trying to think about the kind of attractions for those young men, mostly young men. Yeah. And trying to figure out what those attractions are, which are about politics, but also about style and a kind of certain kind of radical chic as well. I don't know if you've seen the movie Four Lions, that
yes,
film.
I was.
Which, yeah.
Yes.
So even in that, there's kind of overlaps as well with the kind of reasons why young people would want to be involved. Young people raised in England would want to travel and take up arms or blow themselves and other people up, you know.
I was going to ask you about, you know, the use of humour as well, really kind of sharp and biting humour throughout the album that is just deployed to just such incredible effect. And, you know, the fact you've brought up Four Lions, you know, a fantastic film, one that I need to watch again. You know, I was wondering, you know, if you could speak to kind of, I suppose, the use of humour as a tool when addressing and really illuminating, you know, the insidious nature of racism and Islamophobia. And is that something that you've thought through in kind of researching the work of Sweatshop Boys at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is. I mean, obviously satire and humour are a way of dealing with kind of dark issues, right? So, and also getting away with certain forms of political critique. You can do that more easily in the mainstream media through humour. So, and I also think this is a kind of, I mean, looking at it in the more long term, like in terms of these, how many years is it now? 25 years almost, right? 24 years since 9/11. That there has been a rise in South Asian diaspora doing comedy as well. Yeah. So I think you could say that like Heems and Riz and so on are, and through rap as well, often have been part of a kind of growth of South Asian comedy, dealing with these realities, whether it's in England or the United States or elsewhere. I think you can see, is it Emma Rahman in Australia, or who was in Australia as well?
I don't know that.
People doing stand-up comedy, which is really about politics, and there's a, you know, in a way, stand-up comedy is also becoming the new rock and roll in a way in the 2000s as well, right? Everyone's a stand-up comic, but it's also it's a way of dealing with that as well that isn't so tragic, or that leavens all those dark thoughts and ways of trying to understand the kind of terrible political climate, with kind of irony and some good one-liners as well.
Well, we'll have a listen to that now. This is Shoes Off by Sweatshop Boys.
My shoes off at the Monday. My shoes off at the airport. My shoes off at the masjid. Yeah. My shoes off at the airport.
Some of the boys went Syria, some are bankers trading the stock tips. They both flopped economics, but they both in it for the profit. But Rizzy don't do it for the dough. I could've made so much, you don't even know. But really they just saying shake your booty for me, ho. They trying to Scooby-Doo me, but I see there ain't no ghosts. MI5 was giving the boy stress. Now he in Syria looking to fight west of the border. He wasn't sure what force to fight with, till he saw IS had the nicest crepes. Air Max 95 in white leather with a light brown trim from wearing it in the desert and a thin red line running through it. Now he's getting cold feet, but they're telling him just do it.
My shoes off at Gurdwara. Yeah, my shoes off at the airport. My shoes off at the temple. Yeah. My shoes off at the airport.
I couldn't talk him out if I tried to. He's already seen American Sniper. Before he was all Mickey Finn lighter. More of a raver than a fighter. I got mates that been to the Middle East to fight overseas, come back mighty stressed. What they done there is illegal, but hey, that's the IDF. 2005, my first movie wins a Berlin Film Fest, but the spies wanna stop me back at Luton and they ask me if jihad is the reason that I do the movie thing. Stupid pricks. Yeah, Riz is real like Jerusalem. Yeah, so why Rizzy tell the truth to him live from the studio. Breaking news for them, cause Rupert trying to fuck us and we all buying lube for him.
My shoes off at the Munda. My shoes off at the airport. My shoes off at the masjid. Yeah. Oh, my shoes off at the airport. Shoes off.
मैं भी भागना चाहता हूँ। कहाँ भागना चाहते हैं? अपने आप से दूर। भला क्यों? क्या है? जिंदगी मेरा ख्याल है कि हम सब लोग ना एक वो स्लो सुसाइड, वो एक आराम से मौत मर रहे लोग हैं, और वही बात है, और ये हर इंटेलेक्चुअल के साथ होगा.
Nabeel, your final track is Humtum by Nermeen Niazi and Faisal Mosleh from the record Disco Se Agay, which translates to Beyond Disco. Please do correct me for my poor pronunciation. That
was very good.
Okay, thank you. It was originally released in 1984 and then reissued by Disco Stan in 2021. Did you discover this record after its initial release, or did you become aware through the Disco Stan reissue?
Through the reissue. So one of my friends, TV Disco, who's a DJ in Wellington, he told me about this, so he messaged me, and so, I went, oh wow, like, found out about it, looked at the links that he'd sent me, and I was like, wow, a synth pop album. And I'd been really into synth pop, Depeche Mode, Soft Cell, all of that, Pete Shelley, seen many of those groups and danced to their records in clubs and bought many of them as well back in that period in the late 70s and early 80s. But I had never heard of this record. And these two, Nermeen and Faisal, brother and sister.
Was it 14 years old and 19 years old at the time of recording?
Yeah. So Nermeen was 14, Faisal was 19. Their mum and dad were musicians as well. Mosleh Din, their father, was a Bengali composer, music director for films, worked in television in Pakistan, and their mother was a playback singer, for movies, and appeared a lot on television in Pakistan. So this was when I listened to the album, it's a synth pop album. They also lived in Birmingham, where I'd lived nearby. I lived in Walsall in the West Midlands. So I was like, wow, I don't know this record. They're like the same age as my brother and sister. And they made this synth pop record. So I was intrigued by that. And it just so happened that around that time, TV Disco, this DJ friend of mine, who's also an academic, Jeff Stahl, and we'd thrown around the idea of doing a book on synth pop, an edited book, getting various contributors and trying to kind of think about it more globally. And so this was an interesting case study. So I've been kind of writing about this group or this duo, their relationship to disco as well, because there was many South Asian disco artists at the time, film musicians, but also non-film musicians, Nazia Hassan, Salma and Sabina Aga, who were another Pakistani sibling duo who recorded ABBA's songs, but they changed the lyrics and had Hindi lyrics for all these ABBA songs. And there's a lot of, disco becomes huge in the 80s in Bollywood or in the Hindi cinema and in Tamil cinema and all over India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and also across the diaspora. Very popular as well with Arab audiences, Latin American listeners as well. So I've been trying to think about kind of trying to really I call it browning synth pop in England, to kind of have people think a little bit more about synth pop as a genre, which sometimes is kind of taken as being a fairly white genre, although historians have kind of looked at how it's more complicated than that. And thinking about this transnational circulation of this music through cassettes at that time in the 70s and 80s, the cassette's really the main form, and then as well as records through kind of local community radio, not mainstream radio, because Asian music at that time was still really segregated in a way in England. That's what I was thinking about, reflecting on my own background in the 70s and 80s, that we'd have this music at home and go to community centres or gurdwaras or wherever to hear musicians, or we'd hear recorded music in other people's homes from India and Pakistan and so on. But it wasn't out there in the public sphere, apart from, ethnic radio, so to speak, at that time. So there's no world music as yet. It's not called that. And so I was sort of interested in how Discostan basically had kind of tried to reintegrate or integrate Asians and South Asians into English synth pop. I went and talked to them. I went and met Arshia Haq and Jeremy Loudenbeck, who are two DJs as well. So I was thinking about DJ culture and how it's really can do a lot of useful history work. There's always this issue about DJs and archival record labels kind of going overseas and mediating that music for Western audiences, and there's been lots of writing about that is it producing a kind of exotic or neo-colonial imaginary? But I was thinking then about diasporas and also about other record labels that are trying to really understand and flesh out musical styles, from the past in their reissues. And I think my main task now, in what's left of my career, is to try and write more about really that world in which I grew up in, the kind of listening culture of the 70s and 80s that my parents and me as a kid growing up in England and the second generation, how we were listening to music. Because there's a lot written about the Asian underground from the 90s, mid-90s onwards, but I'm kind of interested in this earlier period. I think it's also that both my parents are now gone, so I feel a kind of burden to represent that experience and that time, what it was like growing up in England, but from my skill set, which is really thinking about, I don't know if it's a skill set, but just what I know is the world of pop music or popular music. So trying to figure that out and see what kind of in that gives me into that moment.
Well, I think that's probably a very fitting place to finish. In a second, we're going to hear Hum Tum by Nermin Niazi and Faisal Mosleh. But thank you so much, NABEEL, for sharing your wisdom, your experiences. It's been such an honour and a pleasure to chat with you today.
Thanks, Charlie. That was better than doing Desert Island Dip.
Cubitt community radio.